community work went on, but at the same time I was working in schools with teachers. I was asked if I could help teachers develop alternate ways of assessing children rather than testing. And so I worked for about 6 or 7 years in New Hampshire with teachers. There was eventually something like 120 teachers, and I think we touched the lives of about 1,500 children. And it started in one school, and we had this whole system of how teachers would mentor teachers, and it would grow within schools. And the whole idea was that everything was based on disciplined, systematic observation of kids. And so they were learning how to observe, how to document, how to create ways of gathering all of that information together in ways that made sense to them. So there wasn't one way. It was really helping teachers become ethnographers, fine-tuned observers of kids. And we worked with in some pretty difficult situations. And I would go into the classroom and teachers would say, I'd like you to spend a little time with the little girl in the yellow sweater. It would be that kind of, and I'd just go and sit and hang out. And so we talked about children that puzzled us and how it was we could support their learning. We got to a point where we were documenting enough that we could go to meet the IEP meetings, and when the psychologist would say, this child is having problems with blends, we'd be able to say, we'd go off and we'd get the child reading, we'd video, and we'd say, and we'd be able to say, here, they have medial blends, there's no problem with blends here, and we'd go back in and say, yes, but here's our data from observing the child, and here are the other things that we've observed about the way the child is problem solving, and we can base the work that they're doing, their projects, etc., using their problem solving approaches to learning. So the emphasis is on learning, the emphasis is on the child, and the teacher is there to observe, be a fine-tuned observer, and to work as closely as possible with the children. And one of the schools, this is towards the end, the study got some awards from the NCTE, National Council of Teachers of English, but towards the end, one of the teacher in one of the schools said that they had tracked back children who had been through this kind of approach in high school, and the dropout rate had almost gone down to nothing. There were only 2 children that had come through in, I don't know the years, I can't give the exact numbers, but kids who had been in this very rich problem-solving environment and were empowered and just totally caught up with learning. And we're talking about rural children living in very, some of them in just dire poverty. We're not talking about, upper class kids here who were endowed with all the special things that money can buy. There was no money. We just did it. We just got on and worked with the kids. And eventually we were told to go underground. It was at the time, it's Bloomfeld, isn't it? Sam Bloomfeld and Schlafly, Phyllis Schlafly, they were very focused on phonics and very, and it was at the point where the Business Roundtable got involved and the Christian far right. And so the pressure to make phonics the basis of early instruction was really intense. And someone got to the state, because the State Department was very interested in what we were doing. In fact, they supported it for a while. And then I was taken on one side and told that we should really go underground, and that basically the support just dried up. And what was so sad was that one of the schools the school that had done such phenomenal work, none of the kids were in special ed. The psychologist had got to the point where he'd say, so what are have you got your observations, you know? And so everyone was working together, and the testing was brought in. The idea of family units, because there were classes where there were 5-year-olds with 11-year-olds, so they were family grouped. A whole pile of marvellous things going on. You would never know which child was struggling and which wasn't. Everyone worked together, everyone supported each other, and they brought in a very strict curriculum, the testing, and eventually the principal left, the teachers scattered, and the school just was as if it had never been there. Except, of course, and this is what I used to tell students, if you do an ethnography, if you're there and you document it, then it's there. So what else was going on at that time? It's very sad that, well, you know, I was the one that was collecting the data, and I eventually left New Hampshire. So I know that the school, that particular school, but there were a lot of schools that we were working in. We did a lot of work with children who were really facing tremendous difficulties with just out of school problems. One little girl who had been sexually abused since she was a baby, and she was in kindergarten, first grade, and we worked very closely to support her so that she didn't get put into a special ed situation, because the difficulties she was facing as she was recovering, or we hoped she was recovering, it wasn't going to help her being pushed off into some special ed situation. And all of that is documented in one of the books that I wrote. So we focused on the early literacy development and the mental health of young children. But most of what we did in the 80s is gone. People don't know